Well, hello everybody. Okay, so the following thing happened. You might or might not be aware. I just recorded 2 hours of podcast of the Private Citizen. Complete episode, nicely done, I thought. And then in the end, I realized that my audio interface was bugged. And wasn't working correctly, and that the recording was useless. And it turned out I had streamed with buggy audio the whole time, so I couldn't even rip the audio off the Twitch stream. So that means I will have to sit down now and do it all over again. So if you're just joining me, yes, I'm streaming a podcast episode for the second time. Recording. I will keep an eye on the chat, but as I said previously, I want to keep the podcast experience intact. So I'm just gonna react to if something if I say something wrong or get corrected or something. Otherwise, I'll try to put any comments you have into the feedback section of the show. Well, this is a bit soul destroying, but it's not like I haven't done this before. I've just tested the audio. By the way, I have this now, so you can see what I'm doing. I've just tested the audio again, but I'm gonna try again. Let's just see. I think it could be a tiny bit louder. I think that's better, isn't it? Yes. So let's just try some recording here. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. I hope this sounds good. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Let's see what that sounds like. Recording here. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. I hope this sounds good. Yeah, that is what I should have done last time. You should do that before you record. Well, you live and learn. Okay, now there's nothing to it. I'm just gonna do this podcast episode again and pretend it's the first time I'm recording it. That is the only thing I can do. It's happened in the past with Linux Outlaws. It's always soul crushing. And you always feel like the second recording is just not natural and not as good as the first one. But sometimes it's better because you don't meander so much. Anyway, I'll just get into it because it's getting late and I want to get this episode out today. So afterwards, you can stick around if you want. When I recorded it, I'm going to show you how I finished the show and upload it. I wanted to do that before as well. And then I realized everything was buggered and I stopped the stream. So just pretend that didn't happen, and we will do take 2 here. So let's start recording. Let's go for it. Hello everybody, you're listening to The Private Citizen, your weekly data privacy podcast. This is episode 41 for Wednesday, the 7th of October 2020, the Great Privacy Reset. Hello everybody, I'm Fab, your host, coming to you live from Düsseldorf in the heart of North Rhine-Westphalia, from my new studio here, just behind the courthouse actually. And I'm recording this episode once again and streaming it live on Twitch while I do it because that was fun last time. Seemed to work great, and so I might do this more often from now on. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the UK COVID app that's been released while I was moving and all this kind of stuff. We're going to talk about some developments in Germany that have been happening, some stuff that's been worrying me, and then we're going to talk about something you probably heard about, the Great Reset, and kind of pertains to stuff I talked about earlier on this show, previous episodes, the new normal and all the changes we have to accept now and what's coming, and, kind of trends I'm seeing that are worrying me together with all these coronavirus stuff and the numbers. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some feedback from you, the producers, as well. Which I always say I encourage. Please go to the show notes are at privatecitizen.press. I'm just checking that's actually the website. I always do that. It is. And now get lost. Now get lost on the internet. No. Yes, please do that. Please go to privatecitizen.press. There's all the show notes are on there. All the sources that I use, so that you can look at the show yourself, and then you look at all the stuff I talk about in the show yourself, and form your own opinion, because that's one of the things I want to do with this show. I don't want you to take what I say for granted. I want you to think for yourself and then have a dialogue with me, and in that way become a producer on the show. But before we get into the topics I want to talk about today, there's some housekeeping I have to take care of, because the first issue here at hand is that I did some housekeeping on the actual podcast feed. I changed something in how the episodes are labeled, but that wasn't the big change. A much bigger change was that I had some problems with the chapters in some episodes. So if you're not aware, I'm putting chapter markers in these episodes, and if your podcatcher, your podcast client supports this feature, this means you can jump right to to the different headings that you can also see in the show notes, and that was broken. Some of that was broken, and I had to fix it, and I had to re-encode some episodes and re-upload them, and all of this stuff might have caused your podcatcher to show you double episodes. Certainly happened for some people who contacted me. I did these changes I made to the feed, all according to the podcast spec, and generally like the feed spec for these kind of feeds. And generally, your podcatcher, your podcast client should be able to deal with it. The way I did it, the software should be able to tell that I haven't actually changed the actual files, and it should just replace the old episode, it shouldn't list episode twice. But that happens. I've been podcasting since 2006, and in this time, I've again and again made the experience that podcasting clients are difficult when it comes to feed parsing, which is an irony, a bit of an irony in itself, but it's just the way it is. It's always been like this, and there's weird stuff going on. So if you have double episodes or anything in your feed, the way you can probably fix it is you can unsubscribe from the feed, delete all the episodes you have downloaded, then restart your client. So on a phone, you'd have to kill the process, however you do that in your operating system, just for good measure, and then resubscribe to the feed, and then everything should work again as it should. If that's not the case, there's really nothing I can do. I can only deal with the feed as you're supposed to do, and I have no control over how podcasting clients display the show and episodes beyond that. So there's nothing I can do if that doesn't fix it. I'm sorry about that. And then I've got some better news, some more positive news. People have always asked me, once in a while I always get questions. People are like, what about merchandising? Don't you want to do merchandising for the show? We could support the show that way. I would really like. People seem to like t-shirts. And I've always had these questions with other podcasts as well. And it's always a bit, it's a lot of work stuff, but, especially sort out a store where people from all over the world, because I have listeners from all over the world, can get the stuff that they want to. But I figured out, since I use Patreon anyway, for people who want to support the show, Patreon has a way of taking care of that. They have a service that basically you design merchandise, and then you can specify a tier, and Patreon takes care of everything, producing the merchandise, shipping it all over the world. And since it is that easy, I thought, why not as well do it? So I designed a shirt. I created a new premium tier on Patreon. It's a $30 tier. And the way this works is, if you want this shirt, which is of course completely optional. Sorry, I'm just getting comfortable here with my microphone. My mic boom is doing weird things. It's been doing that all day. It's a bit bugging me a little bit. So if you want that shirt, the way this works is you subscribe to the $30 tier, and you have to be subscribed for 3 months. So you have to pay for 3 billing periods, and then it should automatically send you a shirt. And if you just want a shirt and you don't want to keep supporting at $30, I'm completely okay with that, obviously. So what you can do is, if you just want a shirt, you can upgrade your tier to the $30 tier. Just do that for 3 months, and as soon as it sends you a shirt, just downgrade to the old tier, like whatever you're coming from, $1, $2, $5, whatever. So I'm completely okay with that. This is completely optional. This is just for people who want it, and if nobody wants it, that's okay with me. It was just easy for me to do, and I kind of like the shirt design I came up with. Picture is in the show notes, privatecitizen.press. That is, of course, only a mock-up. I've gotten onto Patreon to send me a sample. Apparently, they can send you samples, and if I get one, obviously I'm gonna take some photos and show everybody what these shirts look like in real life. Because obviously, maybe you want to know that before you commit to spending that much money. So I'm gonna do that. And with that, I think that's all the housekeeping. Housekeeping, mint for pillow. It's an old podcast inside joke there. So let's get onto our first topic. So the first thing I want to talk about is the UK app. So I've talked about contact tracing apps on this show in the past, how they work. I've gone into tremendous detail on how they work, the tests that have been done on the German app specifically, because it was pretty much the first one that used the Apple-Google API. I've explained how that API worked, all of that. I don't want to go into that in great detail now. So if you haven't listened to that and you're interested, go to privatecitizen.press. There's all the episodes are on there. There are always tags at the top, and just look for the tag, the contact tracing tag, and select that, and you will find older episodes, and you can listen to those, and get yourself up to speed. So the UK, obviously, in the beginning was first on the record. The government was saying we want a centralized app, and they started actually developing this app pretty early on. But then the global consensus kind of crystallized pretty much around the time the German app started out as well. The German government at first, or the health authority, the Robert Koch Institute, also wanted a centralized app. But then everything crystallized around this decentralized approach, and Apple and Google rallied behind that and made that, said we're going to do this API, and made that part of it. And it kind of quickly transpired that you have to use their API, otherwise, it'll just eat massive battery. It won't really, collect data in the background. Then you have problems like that in Singapore and Australia. So the UK then switched and said, okay, we're going to switch gears here. We're going to go with that. API, and so they had to kind of reboot their development, which is why it just took this long. This app came out about 2 weeks ago, and of course users now use this Google Apple API, and it does all the stuff the German app does. It has some special features, some additional features. So the register says about this app, the England and Wales app. So this is, by the way, apparently Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own apps. So this is only the England and Wales app. The England and Wales app also includes a system to let users check into venues with the QR code. Plus, it hooked into UK government it is hooked into UK government systems that define hotspots, so that residents will be told if their postcode becomes a high-risk locale for the virus. Such warnings are accompanied by instructions. And these additional features are interesting, and they're also interesting from a privacy perspective, because as I talked about when I talked about the German app, the Apple Google API is open source. It's been vetted. It's pretty clear that that's as far as we can tell benign from a privacy perspective. There are some issues with the Google's implementation, because to do the background stuff, the API uses the Google Play Store services, and those have privacy issues, and those apparently do tell Google who you are, which is actually goes against the idea of this app in general, this decentralized system. But aside from that problem, the Google Apple API is pretty much unproblematic. We know that part is pretty solid. Now there's obviously these apps are basically 2 or 3 parts. There's this API, which part of the operating system, and then there's the front end, which is like the app the local health authority does, and then there's a backend server. But like this, the actual front end is what comes into focus with privacy problems. Because there's every country has their own implementation. The German one, the Robert Koch Institute, is SAP, and developed for the Robert Koch Institute, is relatively well vetted. It had some earlier issues that have been solved, but it's been looked at a lot. Now, as far as I can tell, the UK version of this app, there isn't so much documentation on this. I don't think it's been vetted that well, and it isn't starting out. It's not very encouraging what the register writes here. So this 2 weeks ago, the NHS has published a privacy guide to the app. However, at the time of writing, the article on duration of data retention produced the error: the requested knowledge article is unavailable. Please contact your portal administrator. And that's the same. I checked that today, and it still says the same thing. So they don't tell you how long the data is being retained, which isn't helpful. And the danger here is that, of course, this implementation by the local health authority could violate your privacy and could read out data, right? That's supposed to be not getting back to anybody. So there's some questions about how well that is implemented, and it depends on how good the programmers are. With the Google and Apple API, everybody can look at that. That's been used everywhere. They know what they're doing. They're professional, really good programmers from Google and Apple that did this. Whereas with your local health authority, you don't really know. There are some other issues with it. The register here says some things that actually I don't really agree with. So they talk about this problem with the data retention, and then they say that may be the least of users' worries, given that the UK yesterday, so it's 2 weeks ago, reintroduced some restrictions on movement after a recent surge in COVID-19 cases that, as recorded on the National Coronavirus Dashboard, have seen daily cases return to levels not seen since May. Folks are told to wear face coverings depending on the circumstances. Those who can work from home should do so, and businesses in the hospitality industry must close at 2200 local time and offer QR code check-ins. The government expects these measures will stay in place until March 2021, which is quite long. That's quite draconian. Ironically, these restrictions on movements may make the new, and this is now stuff I don't agree with, ironically, these restrictions on movements may make the new app less effective. Other countries have pushed to have at least 60% of their population adopt the app, as that level of adoption means it records sufficient interactions to make a difference. But with fewer people out and about, the volume of data gathered by the software declines. And this is this 60% number is we don't know we don't know what adoption is sufficient to make a difference. We don't even know if these apps make a difference. That's the thing with the German app. We don't know that about the German app. The 60% number is originally from this Oxford study, which in itself was just an educated guess. It's not very scientific. I would say we don't know. Scientifically, objectively, we don't know. We don't even know if these apps work. We don't know what adoption you have to have for them to work. This is all a shot into the blue. We don't know if these apps work. And I've talked about this in early episodes, so I don't want to really go into this anymore, but I think it's a bit shit from the registers to say that level of adoption means it records sufficient interactions to make a difference. I have seen no data from any country that would suggest these apps make a difference. I mean, you can't even, there's not even correlation. You can't even say, well, look, this is when the app started to gain traction, and here's when cases stagnated or declined. Like, even if you could say that, even if that was the case, correlation doesn't equal causation. That wouldn't be very scientific to say the app makes a difference. But we can't even do that. There's no, you look at the cases and you look at, in the case of the German app, we can tell how many reports of people, how many tokens where people say, okay, I'm now positive. And then you don't know how many people have said that they're positive, but we know how many positive events, like how many positive contacts have been reported and distributed to the system. And there's absolutely no correlation. There's no pattern you can discern. So as far as I'm aware, there's absolutely no scientifically reliable data for this. We don't know if these apps make a difference. Meanwhile, basically on the same day when the app came out in the UK, the algorithm was immediately criticized. And this is the thing I talked about in the episode where I talked about the backend software, how the API records all these like distance, and we know that's not very scientific either. It's like Bluetooth, and it estimates on all of this stuff, but it records like the signal attenuation and then tries to guess the distance, right? So we have like a distance indicator, we have a length of exposure indicator, and we have later on when somebody has put their test into the app, we know what date, like how far along in their illness they were, and then the server, the health authority server side of the thing will use that data. All of this data comes from the API, but the API doesn't decide what to do with that. It just provides that data. And then the health authority server side will explain, will interpret that data, right? We'll say, okay, we judge exposure this long at this distance to be that dangerous. And every health authority can implement that. I mean, there's a spec in the API, but basically they can weigh that. They can decide their own thing. And the register says about the the NHS version of this. While the app uses Apple and Google's contact monitoring APIs, at its heart is a custom risk scoring algorithm designed to rank the risk of exposure. Sure, because that's part of the thing that the health authority implements. Alerts are sent based on the amount of time spent in close proximity with a confirmed COVID-19 coronavirus carrier. Being within 2 meters, about 6.5 feet, of a sufferer for 5 minutes is ranked at 300 points. If you're in medium proximity, defined as between 2 and 4 meters, 6.5 and 13 feet, the amount of points accumulated is halved to 150. In order for the app to issue an alert, the user needs to cross the threshold of 900 points. In practice, that means that you only need to be in close proximity with an infected person for 15 minutes to receive a warning. For those slightly further away, that's 30 minutes. It's not hard to imagine how you might cross that 900-point threshold, even at a medium distance. You could be on the same bus for half an hour, you could share a workplace, even one with social distancing in place and desks carefully spaced out. While you can understand why the app's algorithm would conceivably take a more aggressive approach in isolating those potentially infected, it's inevitable that false positives will be an ongoing element of this app. And I think some of this works kind of like the German app, the 15 minutes and all that, but I don't know if the German app is that sensitive when you are further away than 2 meters. But generally it's kind of, yes, that's an issue, but this is there's more underlying issues we talked about. There's the question if this Bluetooth, this Bluetooth measurement even like remotely confirms how the virus spreads in real life. There's all these issues. They talk about being on a bus. We had this research, I think from Trinity College, where they were talking about, they did some tests on tram and on a bus, and all the metal everywhere reflects everything. And basically the measurements were a dice throw. Like you could, so you had a 50-50 chance of the two phones actually, seeing each other, depending on where they were, and actually recording an exposure event. And what they did is they had all the tests they ran, the phones were close enough. The API in 100% of the cases should have recorded an exposure event, and it did it in 50% of the cases. So instead of all this fancy Bluetooth stuff, they could have just thrown a die and it would have been as correct. So there's a lot more underlying problems with these apps anyway. And this mirrors, I'm just going into this whole thing shortly because from what I'm reading here and what I've read in other stories, everything that the UK is currently experiencing with the app mirrors what happened with the German app. So I feel like in this podcast, we are a month ahead of the curve. You've listened to all of this when I talked about the German app, so now it basically applies for the UK app as well. There are, of course, other troubles we're running into, with all this data collection. And there was another story in the UK this week, actually on Monday, to do with testing, where I actually had a very, very embarrassing Excel blunder. And I'm just going to read this out. This is from Ars Technica, quoting The Guardian, but I'm just going to read this excerpt here. Public Health England admitted on Sunday that the agency has underreported COVID-19 infections by 15,841 cases in recent days due to a, quote, technical issue. The missing positive tests were conducted between September 25th and October the 2nd and have been added to national since been added to national statistics, the agency said. PHE was responsible for collating the test results from public and private labs and publishing the daily updates on case count and tests performed. In this case, The Guardian understands one lab had sent its daily test report to PHE in the form of a CSV file, the simplest possible database format, just a list of values separated by commas. That report was then loaded into Microsoft Excel, and the new tests at the bottom were added to the main database. But while CSV files can be any size, Microsoft Excel files can only be 1,048,576 rows long. When a CSV file longer than that is opened, the bottom rows get cut off and are no longer displayed. That means that once the lab had performed more than 1 million tests, it was only a matter of time before its reports failed to be read by PHE. The agency says it will take precautions to make sure an error like this doesn't happen in the future. And I mean, this just shows this is the kind of people and this is the kind of technical know-how that all of this is based on. All of this analysis, all of this cases, all of this policies. This is a house of cards that is just poised to collapse, I feel. So that's what we have from the UK. Let's move over to Germany. There's some things that have changed that since we last talked about, coronavirus and whatever is going on in the wake of that. Let's talk about some developments in Germany. So here I've talked about, especially on a recent episode, about the hospitality industry and the restaurants and how they have to keep these lists now, and how there's problems with that. There's problems with the software, and I talked about certain software and the CCC, the Chaos Computer Club, finding issues with that. And the recommendation there was, if you use software or if you use paper lists that the police can look at and people can look at your personal information that shouldn't. The recommendation from privacy and IT security folks, including from the CCC, was just, don't put your real personal information in. Put, first name, please, last name, email me, and then put a valid email address, and that's it. Like, why would you have to put in your name and your address and whatever? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, because they don't actually need that personal information. The only thing they do need is a valid way to contact you, right? And if you are like me, I'm pretty much 24/7 reachable by email. They don't need any more than my email, right? They'll contact me and I'll tell them who I am, and then we can do contact tracing, right? And then I give them a phone number and they can ring me up. They don't need any more information. So I thought that was reasonable what the CCC said. Now, of course, the federal government, Angela Merkel and the head of the federal states got together and once again, in total harmony, just decided change policy. And the new policy is that it's now illegal to put in, you have to put in the full information. You can't put in any fake information. That's illegal, and you can get fined 50 euros. Now, the thing here is, to fine you 50 euros, they have to catch you. And who's going to catch you? We talked earlier on early episodes about this, that in Germany, we have ID cards, but if I go to a restaurant and sign a list, they can't make me show my ID card. I think it would actually be illegal for them to try that. The police can do that, but only in certain circumstances, traffic stops and stuff like that. It's actually, it's regulated. And so nobody's going to check this. Nobody's going to enforce this. So this is just a smokescreen, right? This is one of these mind games again, where they're basically... these work. We know these work. They're basically speculating on the well-documented tendency of the German people. If you say something is illegal, you have to do this. The German people will just listen to what the government says. Do what the government does, and not think about this logical and think about they can't even check this. Why this doesn't make any sense. And there's another one of these. And this was immediately recognized. On the evening news when they announced that this was going to happen, they talked about the fee. And then the next thing the anchor person said was just like, yeah, but that's just, they can't check it anyway. So it's just, it's just a trick, basically. They didn't say that, but, everybody immediately recognized that this was just... It's just trying. And it's like so many of these policies that I've talked about before. They know that certain things are illegal, so they try tricks, right? They can't really force you to wear a mask, so they force the owner of the establishment to force you to wear a mask. It's all this kind of shit, and that just it just goes to show that what they're doing is actually working around established laws. Like, according to established laws, all this shouldn't be happening, right? Otherwise we would have a working legal framework. And if they actually were confident, they could try to create an actual legal framework. It's, the thing I talked about with the apps, and having a law that says, right, this is voluntary and stuff. Or if they tried to have a law that said you have to wear face masks, then they would immediately run into like constitutional challenges, and they might lose those, and the law wouldn't, they're basically afraid the law wouldn't hold up, so they're not even passing a law. They're doing all this shit through the back door. And that's one issue we need to be aware of. The other issue is that, all these government institutions, they say they want to do one thing, and then they just creep around, and a few months later try again. In this case here, in Germany, the Robert Koch Institute, the RKI, which is the government's institute, we talked about them. They collect all the data, and they originally want a centralized app. We talked about that when I talked about the UK app. And then everything went to decentralized, but they still want a centralized app. And, they have another app, for example. They have this app that you can use, you can install if you want, and then you can, if you have a fitness tracker or like a health band, or, or your iPhone collects health data, then you can volunteer and give them that data. And then they can presumably fight COVID with it or whatever. And now they want to put that app together with the tracking and tracing app, and then they want a third app that they want to integrate where it's for teaching the public about, I don't know, coronavirus, whatever. And they want to get all of that together, and they want to put all the data in one place, and then they would want to put that in the cloud, and they want AI analysis. Of course they want to do all of that. And it's like, it's just a few months, and they're back to that. They're back to the centralized. They're back to, we want all of this information. We want to analyze all of this information. We really need to watch out for that, right? But because what's going to happen, right? You have this tracking and tracing app that is decentralized, where you're anonymous, or as anonymous as possible. And then they integrate that with their app, where, you might have the other app installed where you're sending them health data. Yeah, it's pseudo-anonymized, but, they get all this data. And we know the more data you get from the more sources you get, the more likely it is, even if it's pseudo-anonymized data, for them to know who you are. And we talked about this on the show again and again, especially if location data is involved. It's almost impossible to pseudonymize that, right? If you have the data set where every morning you leave one place, you go somewhere else, and you stay there for 8 hours, and you go back, you know where the person lives and where they work. And from that, it's trivially easy. Like, we know this metadata analysis. We know that you can tell who the person is from that. And this is where it's going. And this is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. This is the Great Reset topic. This is basically my soapbox for the show, for this episode, which is, what I want to tell you about, which is like, there are all these moves afoot to change things, to change how we look at our privacy and to collect this data, and we need to be really aware of that. But before we get into that, one of the things why I don't trust the RKI here is, there's several reasons. One of the reasons is I have sources within the Robert Koch Institute, and they have told me that, first of all, they've never been good with data. Apparently, they were really, really really couldn't cope with this the data they were getting at the beginning and dealing with it. I guess pretty much like the CDC in the US, which had similar problems. But there are people within the Robert Koch Institute that if you ask them, what's the tech know-how? It's like, oh, we're the last people you want to develop an app. And then I just some stuff they are doing just rubs me the wrong way. Like one being like their reporting, right? They have this dashboard and they report daily cases and they report a cumulative total number of deaths, but they don't report daily deaths. And well, not on their dashboard. That's what everybody uses, what the media uses. Everybody that wants to stay informed is looking there. Then if you dig into there, they have like these daily PDF reports, right? If I put one in the show notes, this one for yesterday, Tuesday. So if you dig into those, they actually report daily deaths. So if you look at this, we're talking the 6th of October here, Germany reported 2,639 new cases and 12 deaths. And I don't know why they don't put that on the dashboard. I have a feeling it's because, they kind of profit. I mean, the RKI must be the best funded government institute in decades now. They have to do all the testing, they have to do all this shit, get all this money for this, and they profit from being the center of attention, which they are the center of attention as long as this pandemic's going on and as long as people are worried. Now, I think if they put the 12 deaths on there, people who can think straight, and sooner or later somebody of my colleagues in the media will at least, I still have hope that some of these people will start thinking, and they will realize that this isn't as bad as people make out to be, because it's okay. 12 deaths a day sounds bad. That sounds bad. I mean, anybody dying is bad. Let's not kid ourselves. If this is you or a relative, it's really bad. But we're talking all of Germany. We're talking over 80 million people here. And just to put this into perspective, okay, we have 12 deaths a day from coronavirus, right? In Germany, this is just we don't have real numbers about these kind of things. This is just estimated, but it's estimated that in Germany every day 40 to 50 people every day die in German hospitals due to medical malpractice. 40 to 50 people. It's just something that happens. We know that for decades. It's about 19,000 people a year, and that's just like estimates, probably higher. I don't know. You'd think like the rate of people we don't know about would be quite high, but I don't know. But let's go with 40 to 50 people. I mean, that's a lot more than people are dying from coronavirus. And that's not in the news. They're not saying in the news, well, today 50 people died from medical malpractice. People would stop going to the hospital probably. If they got as panicked about this as they get about the coronavirus test. And I think people, I mean, I can't imagine they're not starting to wake up, because even if you look at the total numbers that the RKI is reporting, you will notice. I mean, we have so numbers from yesterday. Germany, or I think this is even today, had in total 9,546 deaths, and we know this is like pretty much anybody who's died and who was positive, then not necessarily died directly of coronavirus. I mean, I talked about on the show the coroner in Hamburg who said he didn't see one person who actually died of coronavirus. They all died of something, some illness they had, complicated by also getting coronavirus. I mean, but yeah, you could say, okay, the coronavirus is the cause. That's, is an argument we can have. I'll give you that. But, 9,546 deaths. So you'll notice that Germany even if you look at only the total number, if you can remember a little bit back and you've been looking at these numbers, you kind of notice that we reached 9,000 deaths in July, at the beginning of July. So that means from the beginning of July, we now have the beginning of October, Germany had 600 coronavirus deaths. That's not really many. I mean, it's 600 people that died. That is bad, but it's not that much. And, in their report here, the Robert Koch Institute actually talks about proportion of deaths 3.1%. That sounds a lot. But you have to imagine, you have to remember that this is 9,546 deaths, and 303,258 confirmed cases. So that's where the 3.1% comes from. It's deaths relative to confirmed cases. Now, we know that a lot more people are infected with this virus than are confirmed cases. We know that people get this and don't have any symptoms at all. We know that people only have mild symptoms. They will not get tested. They will not go to a hospital. So we have a huge number of people that got this disease and are not in this total number. And talk to people. You will realize that that's the case. I mean, we don't know. This is all anecdotal evidence, but so there are no total numbers about this because we don't have them. But they're piling up, right? So I watch these UFC cage fights, and you have these, they're athletes and they're professionally beating each other up. And they have this very strict testing regime where they test everybody. And it's again and again now where these fights get canceled because the fighter in question was tested positive for coronavirus. Now, they got there. They were ready for the fight. They did a complete training camp for months. And then they got to the UFC, to the, Fight Island, whatever, in Abu Dhabi. And they were tested. And then they realized they were positive. They didn't notice. They're in a training camp where they're training. So they get up, they run 20 kilometers. They lift some weights. They spar for 25 minutes, beat some guy up, get beaten up. Then they go into the sauna. They do all this shit where, like, before the weigh-in, they lose, 10 pounds. They dehydrate their body. And they do all this. They put themselves through this most rigorous training you could ever have. Like the north of, NFL training. This is like the toughest stuff you could ever do. And they're positive. They don't realize. Right? Because there's obviously people where this virus they have no symptoms whatsoever. So we know, I'm pretty sure we know there are a lot more people. So I think the 3% number is actually not representative of, reality, as in mortality rate. But yeah, I have issues with the Robert Koch Institute and the way they're reporting this, and I have issues with my colleagues, on the evening news, and they're writing in the big mainstream publications because they are not. This is not talked about. If you look at the death rate, it's going down, and the funny thing is nobody knows why. It's really. It's really up for debate in the medical community as well. I have a lot of sources that are doctors. I talk to a lot of doctors, and especially recently, because this is an interesting topic, I try to hang out socially with doctors whenever I can, and I always kind of get to, over beer or whatever, try to get them to talk about coronavirus. And I recently had a very interesting discussion with somebody I know who works in a very big hospital, and she's going through, she's like in her first year of being a doctor, and this is when, like, in a hospital you go around, you basically go to every department because you don't know what you're going to specialize in yet, and they want you to get a feeling of all the departments and of everything works. And she's been, for months now, she's been in the emergency room. So she's been in the emergency room through a lot of this COVID-19 stuff, and obviously they get a lot of people COVID and stuff. And I asked her, this death rate's going down. She's like, yeah, we are talking about this as well. And I'm like, what is it? I mean, I had two theories. I'm like, A, is the virus changing, right? Is it mutating? Is it a different strain? Is it not as deadly? Or B, are we just treating people better? And she was like, definitely B. There were a lot of mistakes done in the beginning. When the stuff in Italy was happening, everybody was panicking. They didn't know how to treat this. It's like with the medical malpractice, right? I'm not being mad at doctors. This is just, that happens. Everybody makes mistakes, If you're a plumber and you make a mistake, somebody's living room gets flooded. It's not nice, pretty shit, but if you're a doctor and you're in an emergency room, you make a mistake, people die. And that just happens. It's just a part of life. Those 40 to 50 people every day that die in Germany because of this, that just happens. We accept that. But funnily, we do not accept the 12 people that die of coronavirus. Right? We are like, oh no, we all have to wear masks. Right? We're not going, hey, 40 people a day dying of medical malpractice is unacceptable. We need to have like an oversight committee for doctors. They're killing people. Right? We're not doing that. So anyway, I was talking to her and she's like, yeah, I think we just know a lot more about how the disease develops. We know a lot more how to treat it. I mean, early on, a lot of people were put on ventilators way too early. It's one thing people talk about. And now we know more about the risk groups and we know what to do and when to do it and all of this kind of stuff. And that is fascinating to me. And that is not being discussed at all, right? There's no talk shows on mainstream TV where they're talking about the case numbers all the time. But they're not like, hey, look, case numbers are going up, but the death numbers are going down. Something's like, good news, everybody. Not as many people are dying. They're not talking about that. And so this leads me into, you probably be wondering, I mean, come on. Oh, I probably should have played that jingle. I'm just gonna, I know it's too late, but just a little bit of warning here.
I got myself a case of Wuhan flu. I don't know what I am supposed to do. Didn't know I had it when I gave it to you. Now we all got the Wuhan flu.
I just like that jingle so much. Thanks to No Agenda, as always, stealing their jingles. But yeah, so, why is he talking about this? I mean, the thing is, the thing that's going on here is we're reacting to this virus in a certain way. And we're reacting to the situation. And it'd be okay for me if that was just it. If this was like on a medical level or whatever. And even if it was only wearing face masks, I could accept that. To me, that's a political thing. Joe Biden yesterday said wearing masks, that's just science. That's not a political statement, which is absolute and utter bullshit. The guy doesn't know. Like, when somebody like Joe Biden, when Trump's the same way, any politician, Angela Merkel, when they say, hey, this is what the science says, what they mean is I have a guy who I trust who tells me that's what the scientists say. They have no idea about anything. Like, they're not on PubMed. They don't even know what PubMed is. They're not reading papers. They don't know. Angela Merkel probably still knows what peer-reviewed papers are. But, that has nothing to do with science. Like, believe me, I've been looking at this for months now. There is no hard scientific evidence that this masks work for this thing. We know they work for certain things. They're surgical masks. They were designed for surgeons to wear them during an operation, and they filter bacteria. There are there, so when they operate on you and they breathe out or they, spit flies, as it always does, it goes into the mask and the bacteria don't go into your open stomach they're operating on. And it works for that. And we know it works for bacteria. You can get a petri dish and you can talk to the petri dish, and then you put a mask on and you talk on another petri dish, and you can tell, well, that petri dish has a lot more bacteria growing on it. So it's obviously the mask is stopping some bacteria when I'm wearing it. Now try to do that with a virus. Viruses are not visible on petri dishes. You can't do this kind of thing. And yes, you can say it works for bacteria. The problem is a virus is a whole, there's a difference between a nanometer and a micrometer. It's like, it's an order of magnitude of different size. The virus is a lot smaller than a bacteria. So, it's an educated guess. We say, well, probably it stops some of the droplets and that probably has virus in it. Yes, I'm completely down with saying, let's wear masks. It's probably good. That's all. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with saying, oh, the science says, the scientists say, the masks. No, they don't. They do not. There are some studies, there's some studies, there's some epidemiological studies where you can have control, like you have groups and you say, okay, this is the same setup as that setup, and people here were wearing masks and people there weren't wearing masks, and the people that weren't wearing masks, there were more infections there. Yes, we can do that, yes. But correlation doesn't equal causation. There are indications that these masks help. But, we can't quantify that. Because it's bloody hard to quantify virus. We don't know. There's all these kind of different masks. Is it a surgical mask? Is it an N95 mask? Somebody wearing a bandana? Is it one of those idiotic face shields that don't, that were actually designed to, if you're a surgeon, so you don't get blood into your eyes? It's this bullshit. It's a political statement. I'd be okay if we have that